cloud. Okay, so everybody will probably have to say it's okay that you're being recorded. All right, so what we're here to learn about today is we are here to learn about images and how to make images work for different projects. So, and we're talking specifically about digital images in this program. Can everybody nod if you can hear me okay? I think that's a line from a Pink Floyd song, but anyway, I have these extra mics around here and I want to make sure I got the right one. So anyway, yeah, we need to be able to send images in. We need to be able to take images of our work. Like Melanie needs to be able to take a photo of one of her paintings and maybe send it in for replication or for publication on her website. The same with anybody else that's doing anything with still images that need to go to digital or to print. So we're going to talk a lot about some very technical things. I'm going to try not to make it horribly boring. I'm going to tell you this is the stuff that feels like you have to shove it into your brain. But hang with me. Hopefully it'll make a lot more sense when we're done. So a little bit about me. My name's Kimberly Beer. I am a professional photographer and digital artist and also a business and marketing consultant. I have been a graphic designer as well for the last 25 plus years. So I started out doing all of this stuff on giant paste up sheets and taking images of it. That's the start of it. And then that moved into computers as they became more popular in the graphic design space. So I kind of got in at the bottom floor of all of this, which is more or less why I understand it. And then also I'm a professional photographer, which doesn't hurt the process. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to be talking about JPEGs, TIFFs, and PNGs. Oh my, how to get control of your graphics. So part of my presentation today is going to be just giving you some base understanding of what some of these things are. And then I'm going to actually take you into two different tools, one being Photoshop and the other being a tool that I found online that I think works really well for about 85% of what you need to do to prepare graphics for any specific purpose, and that's called Photo Utils. It is a free tool. It's so easy to use. It doesn't do a lot of things, but what it does very well. So I'm thinking you'll find that pretty useful as well. All right. So what does it mean when somebody asks you for one of these file formats, and that's what they are, they're formats for digital images. They're also file extensions on your computer. So you'll have like img_2809.jpg or jpeg or .tiff or .ping or whatever. We're going to talk about some extra ones besides these three, but these three tend to be the most popular ones and for a very good reason. So for your trivia, you do not need to remember this, but your trivia is to remember JPEG. To know JPEG stands for Joint Photographic Experts Group, TIFF stands for Tagged Image File Format, and PNG stands for Portable Network Graphic. So if you've ever wondered what those are about, that's the specific names for them. What are they good for? And so we're going to look at each one. So JPEG is the one that you're going to run into the most frequently in today's world. The important thing you need to know as an artist about a JPEG file is JPEGs are what we call lossy compression. That means it has a loss of resolution. So I'm going to explain pixels and we're going to have a graphic here in a little bit that'll help you understand that. But if you think of like all the colors in your paintings or all the colors in a photograph, what JPEG compression does is it takes a look at that and says, okay, this area of this particular photo has like this color blue and it's on there like 10 times and the shade is just slightly different, maybe one hex code different. So instead of remembering 10 different hex codes, which are what colors are called in online, it will compress those all into one. So it says, we're just going to make it all this color blue, which for an artist is really important. You put a lot of time and effort into your work, so you don't necessarily want a computer making a decision for you, because you don't have any control over this. It doesn't pop up and say, hey, Melanie, what color blue do you want in the painting? It just makes the decision for you. Now, online, we oftentimes aren't looking at things in huge formats, right? 27 inches is about as big as a computer monitor gets. So for most of you, you may be working in really large format. So when it's compressed down, your eye may not catch it. But when you want to send that off to somebody to do a print or a reprint of it, it's really important to understand JPEG is not a good type of file for that. It's very good for digital imagery that's going to go on a website or in an email, because it does have this lossy compression. It's going to make the file size smaller. And if we think of bandwidth as a big tube that all of the information has to get through, if the file is smaller, it goes faster. So that means it downloads faster to a computer. It means it downloads faster on your website. It means it gets through the email marketing software better. It just goes a lot faster. So that's why lossy compression is good. But from an artist perspective, there are times that lossy compression is not good. JPEGs are the most widely accepted file format. Almost every device that can display a graphic can display a JPEG. They just simply are, they're the Swiss Army knife of imagery. So, and most of the time when you're working like with a camera, like a digital camera, like this little guy right here, you may have the option of taking JPEG files, and it'll ask you, do you want those in small, medium, or large? And just like I answered Leslie's question, she says, well, the images are way too small when they get from the phone over to wherever I'm doing it. Well, what it does is it takes that JPEG and it not only does the compression piece, but it changes the size. So an image that would be like this will be like a postage stamp when it gets somewhere else. And if it's shown on a phone, that may look great. But if you want to put that into a digital file that will be printed later, it comes out the size of a postage stamp. So what you look at on a screen is different than what you look at on print. And I'll explain more about that. So everybody with me so far, have I glazed anyone's eyes over? All right, good deal. I swear this gets easier as it goes on. So the next file format we're going to talk about is TIFF. So TIFFs are wonderful, but they're the opposite of JPEG. They're a lossless compression. In other words, the compression in a TIFF file often happens in the fact it's kind of like zipped or archived. And then when you open the file in an editing program, you get all the information back. So TIFFs, unlike JPEGs, retain all of the information in the image, which is really important if we're going to do that large format graphics, or if we're going to work on things where we want to have all of that information. What it's not good for is it's not good for websites or putting into email or uploading to your social media, because the files are really big. And remember, our information pipe is only so much. So if this is the information pipe and that's the size of the file, it's sluggish going through that pipe. So we don't want to have TIFFs when we want to upload or download them. But when we want to use it for the format graphics, it's really good. The other thing that TIFFs do that JPEGs do not is they support layers, which if you've ever done Photoshop, you know that there's layers in an image. And TIFFs support saving the layers with the file. Now you can compress them down, or you can leave them so that you can modify different layers of the image. It also supports transparency, which means that whatever color it's put on digitally, it will show through what that color is. Where a JPEG, if you have white, which is considered kind of the universal background, right? If you have white in a JPEG image, it prints as white or it shows up as white. With a TIFF, if you have something that's clear, then it will show up as transparent. So for some of you, that gets to be really, really important in your digital work. TIFFs are really good for logo design because logos many times have clear parts like a stamp that you put on a material, and TIFFs allow us to do that. There are some other formats that allow that as well, but they don't allow for the layering like TIFFs do. So TIFFs are also very widely accepted out in the world. It's been a very common file format for a lot of years. So it's a very popular way to send images back and forth with that lossless compression. PNGs offer the transparency option, but they don't offer layers. Many times when I work with artists with their images for a website, we use JPEGs or PNGs. So JPEGs, where they do more compression, where they do the averaging thing, and it sometimes messes with the color a little bit. A PNG, if it is correctly set up, will offer more latitude. It oftentimes on what we consider more sharp. So like the edges aren't blurry. It's very clear format. The files tend to be larger than a PNG, but smaller than a TIFF. So it's kind of an in the middle sort of thing. It's got a little bit more information, a little bit more color range, but it can have a little more color range, but it can also be a slightly smaller file so we can use it online. And when I say it can have a larger color range, PNGs options in most advanced software that allow you to choose how many colors that PNG has to pull from. So it can pull from 8, it can pull from 24, it can pull from 256, it can pull from 250 something thousand. So there's a lot of range in there that you can give it latitude wise to determine what colors are going to show up. So at the higher end PNGs, which are going to be bigger files, that is a very sharp, pretty image. At the bottom line, it's a really fast loading image. So particular format has a lot of latitude that you can use. You'll see this requested a lot when you're sending in files that are going to be displayed in like a digital gallery kind of situation. JPEGs. So GIFs. So everybody's heard of a GIF, right? GIFs have we've kind of gotten out of using them. They've sort of fallen to the wayside as far as being able to use them for print or for website stuff. Jpegs are just simply better. They offer a lot more color latitude, and their compression is generally more pleasing to the human eye, the way that the file system works. The things that GIFs do, and they are lossy compression, just like JPEG images, and they can be way smaller, but they're going to be a big cost to the color range. The thing that the GIF has that none of the other file formats has, it's kind of special GIF superpower, if you will, is the ability to have animation. So you can take like several little photos together and it compresses it into one file. You guys all use them. They're on our cell phones, right? When you send somebody an animated GIF, we've all done that, right? So that's what GIF allows us to do. But you'll notice if you look at those, a lot of times the colors seem muddy. Maybe there's like shadows don't have a lot of definition. The highlights are usually either really bright or kind of dull. And that's the cost of having at a loss of color range. So you won't be asked for a GIF file very often anymore, in my opinion. I don't think many people are asking for them. There's two other file formats you need to know about. One is called RAW. So these pertain to photographs in and of themselves. So we're talking about things that are put on these cameras, on professional or any kind of digital SLR or digital camera. Now, Apple has also developed a RAW file format for phones, and I probably Galaxy has as well. I don't have those, so I don't have an Android phone, but I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of the digital photography piece. RAW files, which all, by the way, can be transferred in something called to a digital negative. And the RAW file type will differ by camera. Like mine are I shoot Canon, so they're CR2, Nikons are in something or another. So each camera manufacturer has a little extension that goes with it, but all of them are RAW. And what it means is that camera is capturing the entire range of imagery or entire range of colors and light in a way of an image in a way that it can be modified. So one of the things, and you can modify what's called white balance, which determines like the level of color in an image in a JPEG file, but it's kind of done digitally, so it's not effective. In a RAW file, it will actually, if you use software to change the white point, or it'll change the range of the colors with more depth and feeling, which is why most professional photographers choose to shoot in RAW, because they want to have the most latitude with their images. As we've kind of learned by talking about the different file formats, when you take a picture, you know that once you start to save it to a computer, you can lose data. The RAW format has all the possible data that could be in that image, and it gives you more choices when you want to be able to create the image into something other people look at. Now, when you shoot RAW in a camera, the preview on the back of the camera when you take the picture actually shows it with JPEG compression and a little bit of editing. So it'll give you a little bit better view. That's why a lot of times when people aren't professional photographers and they go shoot in RAW, they take their pictures in RAW, and then they get back home and they look at the pictures on their computer. They're like, oh my God, these are horrible. What have I done? I don't want to have these terrible pictures. They're terrible. But they looked great when I saw them on the camera back, but they look terrible when I see them in person. But it's because it hasn't had that little bit of editing. This is the thing I want you to get about a RAW file. RAW files are not intended for use in and of themselves. You have to think of these as digital negatives. Remember back in the day when you had to take a picture on film? Hopefully everybody here is that old. And you had to go to the processor and you had to process the negative and then print the image. There's a whole process in there. You had to line up a dark room, and you had to put chemicals on things, and then you had to adjust the color and the color head when you developed the image. Well, that all still needs to happen digitally, and a RAW file allows you to do that. But the downside is that you need to do that piece of it for it to look right. Because a RAW file captures the widest range of information, the files are huge. So my professional camera, and you'll see cameras there listed with megapixels, that generally is about how big the file will be in megabytes. So if you have a 22 to a 30 megapixel camera, you can expect an image to have between 22 and 60 megabytes per file. So these are obviously the largest files of all of them. All right. Is everybody with me so far? Give me a thumbs up to let me know y'all still alive. Okay, I got Melanie and Jan. Nope, Jan has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go. Here, let me help you unmute. How do I say unmute? Oh, there we are. Ask to unmute. Did you get that, Jan?
Will you be sending us a replay?
Yes, we are recording this and you can get it on the replay. And I should have my chat open, which I didn't do. So you guys can chat with me if you need something. If you think of something while I'm talking and you don't want to interrupt, you can type it into the chat. And I have my chat open now, so I'll notice it. Doesn't look like anybody's been typing in there, but if you want to. Yes. Yes, Jan, we will. A lot of information, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's a crazy amount of information. Trust me, from here on, the hardest part is over. From here on, it gets a little easier after this slide. After this slide. So when we need to understand, in order to understand digital images, we need to understand pixels and resolution. And this is the thing that usually throws people for a loop when it comes to having an art gallery ask you, can you please provide me a blah, blah, blah image? I need an image that's 1200 pixels wide, or we need images that are 600 pixels wide at 72 DPI or 72 PPI. So first of all, DPI and PPI are the same thing. DPI is an outdated term that we used in the printing industry before digital anything came along, and it stands for dots per inch. When digital photography came along, it became pixels per inch. It's usually PPI, but a lot of us old timers, we still say DPI. So they are the same measurement, by the way. So when we look at a digital image, so you see here, you can see this is a rose. Everybody can recognize that this is like a way zoomed in picture of a rose. So we've taken that picture and we've like zoomed way in on it. So each one of these little squares is a pixel. And depending upon that measurement that they ask you for, like we need 2100 pixel images, what they're telling you is they need an image that has 2100, or 1200 is usually more of what you get asked for. It has 1200 of these little pixels across the size of the image. And usually those are digital files. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation today, this is the thing to try to get kind of in your head. When you're looking at a computer screen, typically a computer screen or a television is going to display an image at 72 of those pixels per inch of the screen. Some of the retina displays kind of fudge that a little bit, but typically that it is 72 pixels per inch. So if you have a 1200 pixel image, what you can do is you can take your calculator and you can divide that by 72, and what you get is a 16-inch image. So it would go 16 inches. At 100% of its resolution, it would fully take up a 16-inch, if we had such a thing, monitor. It would go clear across the picture, clear across the monitor. When we do things in print, we have to have a lot more resolution because the way that the ink has to spread on whatever it is that we're printing it on. So it requires a much finer image, which is 300 pixels per inch. So if we have like this printed card, this is not my image, by the way, just something I grabbed off my desk. But here, this image would have had to have been 300 pixels per inch and whatever size it is. So if we it and we found out that it was 6 inches long, we would take 6 times 300 and we would need an 1800 wide pixel image in order to make a print this size. Everybody with me so far? You want me to say it again? Melanie's like, yep, say it again. All right. So Melanie, on a screen, 72 pixels per inch. So if you want your image to show up as 6 inches at 100% on a screen, we would take 6 times 72, which would give us 432. So we would need a 432 pixels on whatever edge we're counting that. Most of the time we're doing it a long edge. Then we would need something 432 pixels. If we wanted the same image to show up in a printed document at 6 inches, we would have to take 6 times 300, which would be 1800 pixels wide. The pixels, the thing that people get confused on is they'll say, a design company will say, I need a higher resolution image, and shame on them because they don't give you better parameters than that. How many of you have gotten that? Your images are too low resolution. Send me a higher resolution image. When they say that, stop them and say, okay, how many pixels do you need on the long edge? How many pixels on the long side? And then they have to give you a number. Because what a lot of people do is they think, okay, I have this image, I sent it to them. Now they want a higher resolution, and they see the little resolution thing in Photoshop. They go, okay, I'm going to make that number bigger. But you're not changing the number of pixels. The pixels just get bigger and it's still as fuzzy. So you have to change the size of the file overall. You have to have that bigger image, so to speak. Are you getting there, Melanie? Unmute, ask me questions.
Yes, I'm getting that, but maybe you haven't gotten to this yet, but I understand that, but I have no idea how you would change that.
I'm going to explain that. I'm going to show it to you on 2 different.
Because this is difficult enough, but the idea of actually doing it is like science fiction. Okay, go on. Okay, go on.
Yeah, and the alien is going to jump out at you if you don't get it right. So the biggest thing I want you to remember here is that pixels count. It's easier to do this if you think of the pixel rather than the resolution. The resolution is redundant. When the pixels change, that's what's important. So when somebody says, give me a higher resolution image, pin them down. Say, how many pixels do you want? How many pixels on the long side or whatever you're doing? We always do long side, so that they'll understand that. How many pixels on the long side to be? And if the image is that many pixels, it doesn't matter what the resolution is, because as we've learned, it's going to show up at that number of inches if it's on a device. So for example, let me give you just one more thing before I leave here. Let's say we had our 6-inch image that was going to go on that's going to be this card that's printed, right? So if I sent the same image that's 1800 pixels to somebody to put on a website, I can tell how many inches that's going to be. I can divide it by 72 and it would be 25 inches, right? That's too big for a monitor. Like it's like huge, but on print, it's this little tiny thing. Okay. So that's going to be a way different thing. And the more pixels, the bigger the file, right? It's going to be bigger all over the place. So it's going to be larger in size. Okay. I've only got 2 more slides here. So size does matter. For websites, images need to be small. And I'm going to show you here in a moment what they kind of look like at different sites, but they need to be small. Most images that go on a website need to be in KBs, which are kilobytes. Print images need to be larger. So those need to be in megabytes. For some of you, if you're taking a 1-to-1 of like an 18 by 24 image, or Leslie, you're creating 18 by 24 digital art, your images may be in the GBs, which is gigabytes. So that's how much data the computer is looking at. A kilobyte is really small, a megabyte is bigger, and then a gigabyte is really big. So that's an important piece of this to understand as well. Remember the pipe, when it's print, we don't care how big it is because that pipe's huge. But when it's digital, we got to be able to get that file through there fast and still look good. One little tip here about getting your files organized, your images organized, there's kind of 3 ways to do this. One is by date. I cannot do this because I cannot remember when I did something. I arrange mine in my own devices. Also by subject is another way you can arrange your file folders on your computer so that you can find things. And then, or you can make it completely up yourself. If it's photography that I'm doing, I do it by wherever I was, that by the location and by the date, because I'll remember the location and then I can go back and find the date. So, or by the customer. I also keep them by customer. So just remember, you need to have folders, and in the folders, there are files. And these are what we're talking about, has those JPEG, TIFF, all of that kind of stuff. All right, so let's do, let's look here first. So these are the images that we're going to play around with today. And you can see, hopefully you can see, I know my screen is like super small. Let me see if I can make this bigger. View. Let's see. 16. Oh, that's a little bit better. Oh, and let's do big. There we go. Now maybe you guys can kind of see what the files are. So here we have the image numbers, and these are all JPEG files. So we're just going to use those for our demonstration today. What I want you to see is I want you to see the size of the files, like 609 kilobytes, 214 kilobytes, 18.4 megabytes, that one bigger, and then 24.2 megabytes. That's even bigger yet. We have a 2 megabyte file and a 7 kilobyte file. So if I open up, let's do this is a 7 kilobyte file. So if I open that up in preview, come on, honey. Computer, wake up for me. There we go. Maybe. Come on. I tell it to go off. Look at how teensy tiny that file is. Look at how small. It's little itty bitty. It's like the size of a postage stamp. My wager is, Leslie, this is what those look like when they come through from your phone. They're like super tiny. That's not good. So now if we take a look at this 2 megabyte file and we open that up in preview, wow, that's a lot of difference, isn't it? Between this little itsy bitsy file to this much bigger file. So let's see. We'll get that in a second here. Okay, so now I'm going to show you. And they, by the way, they look very similar in size when they're in here, when they're in your file finder thing. It's when they get out of here that it gets to be crazy different. All right, now we're going to look at, so photo utils is probably my favorite thing to give people who feel like they're a little bit technically challenged with this stuff, because it does 6 things, and it does 6 things very well. So, and usually it solves a lot of problems for artists, because typically it's what you get. That image is too big. That image is too small. Can you crop this? Can you, I don't like it in a JPEG file. I want it in a PNG. Can you compress it? Can you rotate it? Can you flip it? So these are the things that Photo Utils does, and it does it very well. And here, I'll put the link in the chat So, okay, so Jan, megapixels to megabytes. Megapixels is a measurement on a camera. Megabytes is the size of a digital file. Okay. Do you save images on Google, OneNote, or Evernote? Never OneNote or Evernote because it compresses it into something else. Don't store your images there. I'm not sure what Google Keep is, but I use Google Drive and I use Dropbox, and then I also use my computer. So all of those will work, but don't put them inside of something like OneNote or Evernote, because then they're going to compress and because it's going to take care of that for you. By the way, when you upload images to Facebook, it compresses them automatically as well. So you can't depend on Facebook to store your images because it's going to store really light files versus other kinds. All right, so let's just say that we sent this picture of the dog here. We sent that off to a company that it needs to go on an online gallery, and they send me back an email that says, that's too big. Can you please resize that image? So I'm here to resize an image. Whoops, I don't want to do the how to. Hold on. Upload image. Okay. So where are my files for class? There they are. And here's my dog. I'm going to click on open, and that file is going to upload. And it's going to take a second because my internet isn't super fast. But once it's uploaded, then I can look at resizing it, because I can tell you from opening before, it has way more many pixels than they probably want to have. So let's say they told me they want an image that is 4 inches for screen resolution. I know that 4 inches, or 4 is 72. Our screen resolution is 72. So I take 4 times 72, and that's 288 pixels. And let's just say they want that on the wide side. So across the top. So it's uploading. And as you can see from here, it says width is 1536 pixels and height is 1920 pixels. And then I have a little thing here that says keep proportions. So you never want keep proportions clicked off, because that means when it calculates on one side, it's going to automatically calculate the other. So we don't have to worry about doing that math in our head. So here, if that's the case, I'm going to change this to 288 pixels. And I'm going to click, see, it did height 360, and I'm going to click resize. So the image didn't change hardly at all. And you're like, what the heck? I don't know what happened. But if I come down here, and it's already downloaded it, by the way, when you click resize, it'll put it in your downloads folder. If I come over here and I go to downloads and I open up this file, that's what it looks like. So do you guys remember that the dog, whoops, I need to keep it at 100%. Actual size. There we go. So, and if that's another thing that'll happen to you as well, as you'll go, oh, I didn't change it because I can zoom in on it. But here's my original image and here's my resized image. You see the difference in the two of them? That's pretty huge, right? This was 1536 across. This one is 288. All right. What gets you is you can enlarge this, right? You can make it bigger. You can zoom in on it. But as I zoom in, you'll see if my dog gets to be as big as the other dog, look at how much difference. I think he's even got to go one more zoom. Nope, not quite. But look at how much difference there is in the quality of the image. All right. You see this one over here is really sharp because it's got a lot of data at that size. And this one on the right, the pixels have to get bigger because it's still 72 per inch. The 1500 one has enough pixels. The 288 one doesn't, to be that size. So if I go back to view as actual size, now it looks nice and crisp as well. That it looks good at that size. It just doesn't look good at the bigger size. Does that help, Melanie? Does that
Yes.
finally kind of get it for you?
Yeah.
Good. Any questions about our little dog photo here? And about the difference between the resize? Nope. I'm going to do.
Actually, I had a question. It's not necessarily about the dog, but just a few minutes ago, you said the difference between megapixels and megabytes was what?
Pixels are a measurement of camera file size, and megabytes are a file size on the computer. So it's a designation KBMB, so it's a file size on the computer. Megapixels is it's actually the resolution of the sensor inside the camera, like how much data can it record. So it's a photographic measurement, where the other one's a computer measurement.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. You're welcome. So now I want to show you one other thing. This is compressing a file. So let's say that same person comes back to you and they say, hey, Melanie, we need to keep this file under 150 kilobytes. So would you mind compressing your file to 150 KB? So now I'm on compress over here, and my file size is 1.98 megabytes. I would change this to kilobytes, change this to 150, and then I'm going to click on compress. And that's going to compress my file. And I'm going to open it up over here in my downloads again. We're going to open it up in the same thing. So this is a compressed file, and it has the same amount of pixels per se, but the compression, you can see the image here is not as good as my original image. Like this hair, this dog's little eyelash is really showing up. You can also see there's a lot of noise, especially when we get into where he's wet on his side here. There's not as much definition, but now we have a super small file that is bigger than this file. Let's see, what did that file come out to be? So 148 kilobytes, and our compressed image is 151. So this is the original. This is our resized image, which is 148 KB. And then this is our, and you can see it's slightly smaller. This is our compressed image. This is how good compression is. It took out all of this little extra data. And what you can't hardly see over Zoom, because everything on Zoom is prettier than it is in real life, is that this little background, which in my original image is really pretty and creamy, it's not quite the same here. And I have a little artifact here from there. I mean, if you look really closely, you can start to see where the file that was compressed doesn't have as much oomph as the file that wasn't. So that's 3 different concepts here. This is resizing, this is compressing, and then this is our original image. Yes, Melanie.
Ken, I wondered, when you send a compressed file to somebody, is that something that they can manipulate on their end?
They could if they wanted to, yes. They can manipulate any file you send to them.
Okay, so sorry, my battery's running low. I gotta go get a cord. But is the reason that you compress it to make it easy to send? Is it to make it less data? They want less data, less.
Yes, the reason you compress it is so that it goes through the pipe faster.
Right.
So it's all, digital files are the only files. Things that are going to be displayed on a computer or
Right.
a television are over the internet,
Uh-huh.
so to speak, are the only files we ever want to compress.
Right.
Because otherwise we want the information.
Right, right. So if
Yeah.
they
But
got
it's
it,
just to make it load faster.
okay, but if they got it and they looked at it and they saw that it was lacking, lacking clarity or whatever, like some of the things you're talking about that you lost in the compression, then they could change it.
No,
No,
they
that's-
can't change it back.
that's what I wondered.
Once it's compressed, you've like gone.
Okay.
The information is gone. It's no longer saved in the file. You cannot bring it back.
You can't.
The only way you can change it is that if, let's say this wasn't good enough for them. Let's say,
Yes.
well, we like the file that you sent, but it wasn't good enough. We want to have less compression. So at that point, you would have to go back to your original image, go to Photo Utils and do that again, because
Okay.
the data is gone. It's gone. It is not coming back.
Okay, it's
So they
gone for
can't-
them.
They manipulate it smaller, but they can't make it bigger. That's the
Okay.
that's the thing. Yeah, you're in an Alice in Wonderland. You can take the drink that makes you smaller, but you can't take the drink that makes you bigger.
That's what I wondered. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Go get your cord.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So the main, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask. So the main reason that you would want to compress it is just so it travels faster and there's less data.
Yep. That's
For the
primarily the reason that
receiving
you want to
person.
have a compressed file.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all about speed. It's all about speed and size, right? It has to do with speed. Because with speed, when you're on the internet, like me, I have horribly slow internet. So when it's important, this thing will not stay where I put it. It's important that for me that images be small, because otherwise I'm sitting there for twiddling my thumbs for 30 minutes waiting for a website to load.
Okay.
Whereas if it's another purpose, then it needs to be bigger. It's basically the thing you need to take away is website images really need to be 100% of the size they're going to be displayed at, and they need to have enough compression to make them smaller without damaging image integrity. We did a lot to this dog. I mean, we took it from almost 2 megabytes down to 150 kilobytes. We compressed the bejeepers out of that image. But in all honesty, if you were to pull this up on an email, I don't know as how many people would really notice the impression that it took away. Yeah. I mean, it's not bad. It did a really good job. Part of the thing that I don't like is the artifacts, because this is a black dog in the sunshine. He's already got a little bit of that rainbow effect to him. And then in my background isn't as creamy pretty, but the image carries through even really compressed. So you have to try to remember that this compression stuff, it's powerful. So it's going to take care of a lot of that. But yeah, it's to make it go through the pipe faster, through the bandwidth faster.
Okay.
Yeah, the big reason.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So I'm going to close those out. Photo Utils is what I recommend for most of you. Does anyone have Photoshop? Raise your hand if you do. Or okay. So for everyone that's listening to this is a free tool that is going to get done what you need to get done. It's going to be able to make it so that you can submit pictures to online galleries. You can, I wouldn't necessarily, the place I would not use it is I would not use it to submit for reprints. If you're going to do reprints of paintings or something like that, where you're taking like a photograph, that gets a lot more complicated. And that's where you would want to have a TIFF file and possibly do some retouching and color correction and all of that. And it's going to take a different tool. like I said, PhotoUtils is very powerful at what PhotoUtils does, which is convert file types, crop, compress, rotate, and flip. If those are any of the things that you need to do, this is the tool to use. And it is free. There is no money involved with it. I don't even think they have ads on it. I don't know who blessed us with this, but thank God for them. And it's been around for a while, so I'm pretty confident it's going to keep on. If you want to work with an image, let's say for something a little complex, let's take this tree image, for example. You might want to put that into Photoshop, and I'm just going to give you a quick example. Photoshop is not just resizing, it's everything, right? So it allows me to do all kinds of manipulation to an image, from being able to remove background, to changing little blemishes and all of that. But it let me alter an image, and it's nice to see that. So first of all, I don't know if you'll notice, but if you look at my mouse that's bouncing down here in the lower left hand corner, it tells me that I'm looking at this image at 66.67% of its full size. So the actual full resolution image for this image will not display on my computer screen. It's going to be bigger than my screen. And if I come up here to image and image size, it'll tell me that this particular image is 5,616 pixels wide by 3,744 pixels high. And then it gives me a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. What I really want to drive home is if I change this to 72 pixels, whoops, I got to take off the resample. Hold on. Cancel. Got to have that checked before you go dinking with it. Okay. And if I change this, I'm going to leave it at, oh, I took it off. So it has to be at inches. And I changed this to 72. You see the inches went to 78, but it's not going to have changed the pixels. The pixels are going to be the same. Even if it's 72, it's 78 inches wide now, it didn't change size screen. And if I come back over here to image size and I select this and go to pixels, it's still the same number of pixels. That resolution number, stop making people crazy, or I think tell the people making you crazy to stop making you crazy with resolution. That number doesn't matter. It's this number right here that really matters. So, and if I change the image, up to 300 and I don't have the resampling checked, it'll go back to being 18 inches wide. But the pixels in and of itself have not changed. So just to give you a quick rundown of how you would change something, let's say I got a request to do this image for print, and it needs to be in a TIFF format, and it needs to be 2,500 pixels wide. I would come to image size. I would have my resample chosen. I do pixels. I change it to 2,500 pixels wide, and it's going to shrink on my screen. So see it shrank, and that's fine. And then I would do file, save as, and then I would choose my TIFF format and click on save. And this is where it talks about image compression. I can choose none. I can choose zip. I can choose LZW, or I can choose JPEG, and it tells me which ones are which down here. I'm going to choose the zip format. Yep. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to save that file. And I'm going to guarantee you that even though that's a smaller file, I guess it's not, it's 8.1 megabytes now. So that somebody requested that, that's what I would have to be able to offer them. So I think I got along. I think everybody understands the basics of this. If you guys have any questions, I know we're at the end of our time, but I want to be able to answer those. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share for a moment and see if anybody, I'm going to put this back on gallery view. Did everybody get everything they needed out of this? Good deal, Jan. Leslie, did you,
Yeah.
or do you have another question?
I just have one question. When you change the PPI from 300 to 72, like you were just talking about, does that automatically change the size then?
No.
It doesn't.
No.
You have to do it yourself.
Because the pixels are the same. In other words, the resolution doesn't have anything to do with the size of the image. If you
Okay.
just change the resolution, you don't change anything else.
Okay. Okay.
Because it's you've got to change the number of pixels. If you will not get yourself in trouble, if you always work with the pixels. If you start to worry about resolution, you can get yourself into losing image data or changing image data. But if you always work with the pixels, so when people ask you, tell them, hey, how many pixels is that? And most people will give you pixels and it'll be just fine with it. Other people, it needs to go on a 6-inch card. Well, 6 times 300. 300 for print, 72 for a screen. So 300 for a print, 72 for a screen, and just times it times how many ever inches that they told you it had to be.
Thank you.
Good deal. Okay, and then Jan says, what size should we save normal photos on our phone? So Jan, are these photos you're taking with your phone? Okay. So it's going to save like a full resolution one. If you're talking about like sending it to your computer, I would send the original so you have it. And then make sure that's saved somewhere on a disk. And then when you're sending it, like if you just want to share it with a friend, send a small one. You don't have to send a big one and take up their time to the download. But if you want to share one that you'd like to have printed, then share the biggest, either large or original. So, good deal. All right, guys, take a deep breath. That was a lot of information.
It was.
And just have the confidence to tell people, hey, I need to know how many pixels that image needs to be. What size do you want it? Tall or wide? What number of pixels do you want? Because then you can go straight to photo utils and it's really easy. So
Thank you, Kim.
You're very welcome.
I hope to see you soon.
I am fully vaccinated, so I'm ready to
too.
start coming back.
Please do. Please do. I'd love to see you.
I'd love to see you guys as well. Thank
Bye-bye.
you all very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.